It's great to see all of you. If you've got your Bibles, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4 is where we're going to be. But before we get in there, I'd also like to say Happy Father's Day to you fathers out there. Today is really, and Father's Day as a holiday, really you've got two kinds of people. I believe you've got two kinds of people. You've got those who have, this holiday brings some great memories. And you begin to look back at time with your dad, and you've got some great memories. And then for others, the holiday brings some not so great memories, and maybe even certain hurtful memories, or it causes some kind of pain. And God has a lot, the Bible has a lot to say about fatherhood. And first and foremost being that God himself calls him our Father, that we are his children. And so ultimately, though our earthly fathers, they shape us and love us and grow us by the grace of God, we ultimately have one heavenly Father who has loved us and carried us through. And so to you dads that are faithfully stewarding the gift that God has given you, to you dads that are faithfully stewarding the children that God has given you, man, praying for you, grateful for you. There's certain things that you are doing that nobody else sees and nobody else knows about, and God knows. And there's certain things that are seen, and hopefully your kids grow up to be grateful. For the father, the question is not, and we're talking about fatherhood, the importance of fatherhood, the question is not whether you will be influencing your children. The question is, how are you influencing your children? So it's not, will a father have an effect on his children? It's, how will the father affect his children? And that can either be for good or for bad. And a father, the role of a father is so important that in the way that he acts, the way that he brings up his kids, the way that he treats his kids, treats his sons, his daughters, and brings them up, it can bless his entire family for generations to come. Or in the way that he acts towards his kids, treats his kids, talks to them, is with them, can destroy not just his kids, but generations to come. All of that to say the role of the father is important. And you and I see this in our culture today, that the primary issue of our culture is that, number one, we've moved away from God, but number two, that we have abandoned an important role of fatherhood in our culture. Just to give you some statistics, in the United States, 45% of children live without a father in the home. 45% of children. If you are one of those blessed with a father in the home, you are 2 times more likely to go to college. You are 80% less likely to spend time in jail. You are 75% less likely to experience a teen pregnancy. You are 75% of those who struggle with drug abuse come from a fatherless home. 75%. 71% of all high school dropouts come from a fatherless home. 90% of all homeless and runaway children come from a fatherless home. 63% of all youth suicides are of kids, children from a fatherless home. And so here's what the devil knows. If you remove the father from the family, you've destroyed the whole family. If you remove the dad from the equation, you've got them all. You've got the kids, you've got the wife, you've destroyed all of it. And if you look at our culture, we've removing the importance of fatherhood. We're actually even removing the importance of masculinity, because we have this thing called toxic masculinity. And so every time you talk about masculinity, it's in a negative sense, or it should be in a negative sense. And so we've completely removed the masculine, strong head of the household that God has placed to be able to lead the family, protect the family, provide for the family. You just look in our culture, look at our movies, look at our TV shows. Who's the doofus in all of those places? It's always the dad. And it's always the kid teaching something to the dad, and it's always the dad who needs to be transformed and reformed, and it's always the dad who's screwing up, right? And so our culture has programmed this thing that dads really don't matter, and underneath that is this spiritual attack towards the family and towards the man. And that's where you and I find ourselves in our culture. And so today, I'm hoping that we understand that we need God-fearing, strong, godly, masculine men to be able to lead our homes, to be able to faithfully lead our families. And fatherhood is absolutely essential. And my goal is to encourage you as fathers. I know in Mother's Day we talk about all the greatness of mothers, and in Father's Day we talk about all the places where dads fail, right? But my goal today is to encourage you, to bring you up, that if God has placed you in the position to be a dad, to be a father, that is a high honor, and that is an honor that we should strive to live up to. And so by the grace of God, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. In Colossians, Paul's going to write the same thing. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 21, he says, Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. And so that first phrase, though, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. That word to provoke there means to build up bitterness or to build up resentment or to build up anger in your children. And so the first thing that we should be warned of as fathers is that we have the ability to anger our children. We have the ability in us, in the way that we act, in the way that we talk, in the way that we spend our time with them, to, or don't spend our time with them, to build up in bitterness in our children. And when you talk with people who have a bitterness towards life, a lot of the times, the root cause of some of those issues is their relationship or lack thereof with their father. And so the Bible is very clear in warning us against one thing, that we are to treat our children in such a way that we don't provoke them to bitterness or resentment or anger. And so some of the ways that fathers, some of the ways that we can provoke our children to anger is one of the ways is when we're angry towards them. When we have anger towards them, when we have some kind of resentment towards them, when we have some kind of bitterness towards them, or when we are constantly at 100 level yelling just because we think that they're not going to listen if we're not at that 100 level. Another way is that we provoke our children to anger is that we would embarrass them. Now, dads are naturally embarrassing. As I grow older, I find myself to be naturally more embarrassing, right? And you've got the picture of the dad, and he's got his flip-flops and high-waisted white socks and the plaid shorts, and right, like you're just you become embarrassing, but that's just because of you. But when a father embarrasses his child, when he brings up their insecurity or he is making fun of them, you're just building up that child in resentment. You're provoking them to anger. Another way that we provoke our children to anger is that we belittle them, that we would call them names. Oh, you're just a screw up. You always get it wrong. This is what you always do. And we begin to belittle them, and they begin to grow a sense of resentment, a sense of embitterment. Another way that we provoke our children to anger is that we set a standard of perfection that we can't reach, let alone they can't reach. And so every time they fall short or every time they fail, it's a big deal, and it's blown up, and the child seems like he can't do anything to please the father. And so you build up your children in resentment that way. Another way is that you don't ask for forgiveness. Listen, all of us fathers, we know we are imperfect. We know that we require forgiveness. And when we don't ask our children for forgiveness because we're the dad or we're set above, we begin to build up a resentment in our children. And the last one of the ways that we provoke our children to anger is that we don't forgive them. There must be, like, you've got to be able to not just preach grace, not just teach grace, but you've got to actually be able to extend grace, and you've got to actually be able to extend forgiveness. And it's important for us to realize as fathers that we have an ability in us to provoke our children to anger. And with all that we have, to steer away from provoking our children to anger. And here's what Paul says. He's going, don't provoke your children to anger. And how do you do that? But train them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. How do you steer away from provoking your children to anger? You build them up, you raise them up, you teach them in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. Every child needs two things. Every person needs two things. You need nurture and you need discipline and instruction, right? That's all kids everywhere. We need nurture and love. And listen, nurture and love, not all of it, but primarily nurture comes from the mother. Discipline, not all discipline, but primarily the role of the disciplinary, discipline comes from the father. And when you have one, it doesn't work. You need both. You need nurture and you need discipline. And we live in a culture, which culture do we live in? Nurture or discipline? Nurture. And we all know it. We've taken dads out and we see like we've made dads not important and we've made masculinity toxic and we've completely removed the discipline role. And what we see is the result of a feminized culture. You know a great example of a feminized culture? The participation trophy. Everyone gets one. Doesn't matter if you came in first or last. No, it kind of does matter. You might need to work a little bit harder. Well, it's just about how you feel. Not really. Sometimes you have to do the things that you don't want to do. And sometimes your emotions, that's not the most important thing. Right? And so even me saying that, oh, is he saying? Yeah. Because of what? Because of the culture that we've built around. Because we've put so much emphasis on nurture and not enough. We've removed the role of fathers, removed the importance of that role, and children need both. Yes, loved and cared for and protected at all costs, but also trained, disciplined in the instruction of the Lord. You need both of these things, and it is the role of the father to bring in that discipline and instruction of the Lord. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24, whoever spares the rod hates his son. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. We are to bring them up in discipline. That discipline means to aim upwards. It doesn't mean to beat them with a rod. The rod there in Proverbs is to set up a standard for your son, for your daughter, and lift them up in the ways of the Lord. Listen, punishment is not discipline. Punishment is only half of the work. We're staying away from evil, but this is where the good is. Discipline is to bring them up, to raise them up, to instruct them in the ways of the Lord. It's to show them that there is a right and there is a wrong. And we're going to steer away from the wrong and we're going to pursue that which is righteous and that which is good. You must instill in your sons and daughters who they are in Christ. That no, we don't act this way because we've been transformed by Jesus Christ. We don't act this way because we are a holy people called by Jesus to be set apart and to be holy. And here's what he says in verse 24, when he says, whoever spares the rod hates his son. And what does he say? But he who is diligent. He who is diligent. He who loves him is diligent to discipline him. That word diligent is to actually plan, to think, to implement, and to pursue discipline. Like a lot of us men, we're good at planning and we're good at pursuing and we're good at implementing a lot of different things. We're good at that in our businesses. We're good at that with our relationships. We're good at that even within the church. But when it comes to the kids, we don't really give that much thought to be diligent about how am I going to raise them? What kind of boundaries am I going to set? What kind of standards am I setting? What kind of goals am I setting for them? What kind of vision do I have for my children? Because when we talk about business and church and all those things, we've got great vision for those things. But when we talk about children, is there that kind of diligence? Is there that kind of purpose? Is there that kind of diligence for our children? In Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11 through 12, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord loves him who he loves, or for the Lord reproves him who he loves, as a father, the son in whom he delights. And the point of that verse there is that if you love your son, if you love your children, you will discipline them, just as the Father loves us. And he doesn't just leave us in our sin. He brings us out. He calls us to righteousness, calls us to holy. In your discipline, you set boundaries, you set parameters. And contrary to popular belief, children love when there's boundaries, when there's a set plan, when there's a set purpose where we're going, where there's a set right and there's a set wrong. They feel safe in that. They're able to flourish in that. And we are called to bring them up in the instruction of the Lord. As a father, you have no option about whether you want to be a leader or not. You are a leader. As a father, you have no option about whether you want to be a teacher or not. You are a teacher. By the definition of God entrusting you as stewards, children, you are leading them and you are teaching them. And the question is, where are you leading them and what are you teaching them? Because what we see is that we are to bring them up in the instruction of the Lord. And here's what Deuteronomy 6 says to the fathers, that as you raise up your children, whenever you lay down, whenever you get up, and whenever you walk, or whenever you sit, or whenever you run, you teach your children the ways of the Lord. You instruct them in the ways of the Lord. I'll tell you a couple of examples practically. My kids knew that God created the sun and the stars and the moon only because when they would look up and ask, what's that? Or when we would look up and go, hey, do you see the stars? What follows after that is, isn't the God who created that awesome? When we go to the zoo and we see all these different animals, or we turn on the movies and we see all these different animals, hey, here's a lion in the story, in the Bible. You know a cool story about the lion? Here's Daniel. Let me tell it to you. Here's how God was faithful in his life. It's as you do your daily things, while you're watching whatever you're watching with your kids, and you see a commercial or you see a plot in a movie and you see what they're trying to sell your kids, it's your responsibility to go, hey, you see that nonsense? Here's why that's nonsense. 1, 2, 3. As you live your life, it's not just to have a set time with your kids and then, 1 hour on a Monday and now we're set and we're good for life. No, it's as you live your life. As they're going to school, you're involved. You know the questions that they're asking. You know the things that they're discussing. You're in their life. As you live your life, you're leading your kids. And Crawford Loritz has these 4 stages really of manhood, but it applies to us as fathers. And so the first phase and the first stage of a child's life, especially a young boy's life, is childhood. They're a child and they're growing up, and your role in childhood is discipline and boundaries. Here's what we do, here's what we don't do, here's how we act, here's how we talk, here's how we don't hit. And your role in those childhood years is discipline, and you're just teaching them basic elementary principles. Then they become adolescents. And when they become adolescents, your goal is to be persistent in pulling them through impulsive behavior. Hey, here's what you're wanting to do, and here's where your body and your mind and your emotions are leading you. Here's why that's wrong. We're going to pull back from that. You don't just get to do the things that you want to do. You're going to do the things that are right, that are going to build you up, that are going to make you a man. Adolescence, that's working through that stage. And then you have manhood. And manhood is you taking, or the child taking, the responsibility for himself. Manhood can be summarized in 2 words. It's obligation and responsibility. A man is someone who is able to steward and take care of himself. And by the grace of God, he then has a wife who he's able to steward and care for. And by the grace of God, he's able to have kids who he's able to steward and care for. And he has a church and a community and a friend group that he stewards and cares for. It's obligation and responsibility. And our roles as fathers, if you are at that point, if you've got kids that are in manhood, or if you're trying to grow them up into manhood, our role at that point as fathers is to be instructive, to be as guides. And lastly, by the grace of God, that man grows up into being a patriarch, and you grow up into being a patriarch by leaving a legacy, by leaving a people that you carried, a people that depended on you, a people that you were able to show the grace of Jesus, and their lives are transformed and their kids' lives are transformed. As you lead your kids, you got to start, and I love this example, you've got to start with a tight grip. As they're young, you hold them. You provide everything for them, and every little thing you begin to correct, and you begin to instruct, and you begin to fix, and so you've got a tight grip. And as they get older, that grip begins to loosen. And there's more freedom, and there's more responsibility, and they begin to become their own people. They begin to fulfill God's calling for their life, not just your life, and your grip begins to loosen until ultimately your grip is just guiding them by the grace of God. A lot of times what happens is parents will start off with a loose grip, and then their kids get way too out of control, and now they try to tighten them. At that point, man, they're too slippery. It's a lot harder to begin to tighten. We must be diligent in how we discipline, and how we instruct, and how we raise. And so for us as fathers, that means a couple different things. If we are to be diligent, and if we are to discipline and instruct well, number one, it means that we are to walk in integrity. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 7 says, "The righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him." Right? And so you catch that? The righteous who walks in his integrity. And so talking to the man, talking to those of you who have been saved by the grace of Jesus Christ, you are walking in integrity, and your walk with Jesus Christ is walking in integrity. And then here's the result. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 7, "Blessed are his children after him." Your walk with Christ doesn't just affect you. Your walk with Christ affects those whom God has entrusted to you. And in Proverbs chapter 14, 26, "In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge." That if you walk in the fear of the Lord, and you have strong confidence in who Jesus is, it's not just your life that's blessed, it's your children who then have a strong refuge. Your actions will always speak louder than your words. The way that you live your life will speak volumes compared to the things that actually come out of your mouth. And what your kids need most from you as a father, and what your wife needs most from you as a husband, is for you to love Jesus with all that you've got. For you to be committed to him, for you to be focused on your walk with him, for you to walk with Christ in such a way that then bleeds out into your family, that then bleeds out onto your children. They will see your walk with Christ, And if it is not a genuine walk, they'll be able to see that as well. It's always funny to me when talking to parents who, in their lives, did not take the church seriously, bad-mouthed certain people of the church, bad-mouthed leadership of the church, and really, church was not a priority. The worship of Jesus was not a priority. Always certain things came before the gathering of the saints, and then their kids grow up, and they're like, well, why did they leave the church? Well, I mean, you can say whatever you want, but your actions are going to speak volumes. And before you even realize it, your kids see it. They're going to be able to see it. They're going to be able to sniff it out. They're going to be able to understand. And so walk in integrity. Walk in integrity with Christ. Walk in integrity with others. You can say, hey, we are to love all people. And then in the privacy of your own home, you begin to badmouth and you begin to gossip, or you begin to cheat certain people, or you begin to lie to certain people. They catch that. Walk in integrity. Walk in integrity with Christ. Walk in integrity towards others. And walk in integrity towards your children. Walk in such a way with your children that you show them dignity and and you show them their worth. For some of us, our kids are old enough to where we can say that they have been saved by Christ. And so you know what that means? Yes, they're your children, but also in Christ, they are your brothers and sisters. And by the grace of God, I pray that for my kids, some of you are already there. Where obviously, no matter how old you get, you're going to see them as kids, you're going to see them as little, but you offer them that worth and that dignity of Jesus also saved you. Jesus also has a calling on your life. Jesus has a plan for you, and it's not just all about me. He's got something for you as well. You walk in integrity towards your children. So the first is we walk in integrity. The second, fathers, how you treat your wife matters to the way that you raise your kids. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. How you treat your wife reveals, especially to your children, because they see it, it reveals what you actually think of Jesus. Because we're called to love our wives as Christ loved the church. One of the best things that a father can do for his children is to love their mother and to deeply love her and to care for her in such a way that the kids see the love and they feel safe and they feel guarded and they feel no matter what happens, my father and my mother, they're solid. One of the greatest gifts you could give your kids is to love their mother and to love her well. And in the way that you treat your wife, fathers, I'll say this, your sons see an example as to how they should treat other women. And in the way that you treat your wife, your daughters see an example of how they should expect to be treated. It is a big weight, and oftentimes one that's not talked about when raising children. And so you work on that. You make that a priority. Your walk with Christ, and then your love towards your wife. A father who loves his wife well, he's going to be a safeguard for his children. Number 3, as a father, you step up and you don't walk away, and if it's been given to you, you own it. Going back to last week, the question we asked when talking about stewardship in general is, how do you view your life? Do you view it as having been given to you, all that you have, all that you are, that's been given to you by God? Do you view your wife as that gift from God? Do you view your children as that gift from God given to you, entrusted to you? Because here's the thing, your kids have been given to you and they've been given to nobody else. It's not the role of the church to raise them. It's not the role of Awana to raise them or the role of teens ministry to raise them. The role to raise your children and teach them is not given to the schools or to the government. It's given to you alone. And listen, you can be like, there's 100 guys that can call themselves a builder, 100 guys that can call themselves an engineer, a tile layer. There's so many occupations that a lot of guys can go, here's what I do. Pastors, all those roles. There's 100 guys who can claim that title. The title of being the father to your children, like the title for me of being the father to Ben, Matthew, and whatever we name the third one, that is given to me alone. That's not given to anybody else. And that's the same for you. It's the same for you. Those 2, 3, 4, 8, maybe, however many kids God has given to you, He's given those to you, nobody else. And you are called to steward. It's yours. Own it. Own it. Carry it. Step up. You need to let them know. You need to let them know that you understand your role in their life. You got to be close. You got to be face to face. They got to be able to feel you. You've got to wrestle with your boys. You've got to hug your girls. You've got to let them know, this is my role. This is my place. This is who God has called me to be. You've got to set that love in your kids' lives. Talking to some young guys that are finishing up college and stuff, and they say they're busy and they just haven't learned yet what actually busy looks like. And so it's always great to me because you get to instill into these young men, hey, you've got to grow a spine. And it's got to be steel. And you've got to be able to carry yourself. By God's grace, then you can carry a wife. By God's grace, then you can carry a kid. And by God's grace, then you can carry maybe multiple kids. And by God's grace, maybe you help in the church. And by God's grace, maybe that helps in the community. But you've got to be able to grow that. You've got to be able to step into that. And you've got to be able to realize that that's where I'm going. You want to be dependable. You don't want to be weak. You want to be a man who is actually dependable enough to be trustworthy, to actually show up when he says he's going to show up, to when he vows till death do us part, it's actually till death do us part, to when he promises that you are my children and I'm called to love you, that you have stepped up and you've loved them. That's who you want to be. You want to grow that kind of spine. You want to be those kind of men, the men that God calls us to be. And it takes a lot of work. Yeah, it takes a lot of work. And are you tired? Sure. And sometimes do you get to do all that you want to do? No. And that's a beautiful thing because you get to do what you have to do and what God's called you to do. Step up, don't walk away, and if it's yours, own it. And in order for us to be those kind of men, men who walk in integrity, men who love our wives, men who step up and don't walk away and own it, in order for us to be those kind of men, prayer is where we must live. Because all of us have places to grow. Last night I was going over the sermon and kind of finishing up, and the kids, man, they grow and they're just having a hard time falling asleep now, right? They've got too much energy, and for whatever reason now they talk to each other, and so it takes a while for them to fall asleep. And so I went there once, and I went up there twice, and third time, Proverbs 13 says, "Don't spare the rod," right? But even preparing for a sermon on fatherhood, just knowing, man, you gotta, there's no perfection here. It's not talking down. This is talking, hey, here's what God's calling us to. Let's go up. And so that's why I say prayer is where we must live. I referred to this last week, but I want to say it again. When you're a father, God the Father has given you his title. Any loser can be a dad, but it takes a man of God to be a father. And to be a father with that comes certain responsibilities that God also entrusts to you. And so here's what I mean. You are called to love your children, but the ultimate love is from the ultimate Father, right? And so your love is showing the love of God the Father. Yeah, you're called to protect, but the ultimate protector is the God of all things who is sovereign over all things. He is the ultimate protector. You are called to provide, but ultimately everything is from Him. And yet He still entrusts you in your little world, in your little 2,000 square foot house with your wife and your kids. Like He's called you. He's called you. You're going to be the one to love. You're going to be the one to protect. You're going to be the one to provide. And in order for us to live up to that, it's going to require for us to live in prayer. To live in prayer. The prayer I pray for my kids most often is, God, I hope I don't screw up. God, I hope I don't screw up. And the most important prayer is, Lord Jesus, you save them. But that's where we've got to live. We can't do it with our own strength, with our own discipline. It's by His strength, His discipline. Prayer is where we live. And finishing up here with a couple of thoughts. If your children have wandered away, so let's say you're a father and your children have wandered away from the Lord and there's a strain on that relationship, I want to point you to Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15, the response of the father when the prodigal son goes away and he returns, the response of the father is one of waiting and expectation and hoping and praying. In Luke chapter 15, the story is not really about the prodigal son, or it's not even about the son who stayed. The story is about the father. And the father in Luke chapter 15 was perfect. He was the perfect father, and yet he still had a prodigal son. And so if your children have wandered, then for you, your role is to remain in prayer, it's to fast, and it's to plead with the Lord for their salvation. And if you were the kind of father who not only were you not perfect, but you were negligent and you really had a lot of other priorities, or they weren't really a factor in your life, then your first thing that you can do is ask for forgiveness. And then figure out how, in whatever stage of life my kids are, how do I fit in? And then secondly, I want to address those of you who, if your dad was not a great dad, and I've talked to a couple people who, when we talk about God the Father, they're like, it doesn't fit into their heads because of their experience with their earthly father. If your dad was not great, then your responsibility as a Christian is to forgive and to honor him. Not because he was great, but because that's what Jesus has called you to do. The command to honor your father and mother, does not come with a caveat. It does not come with an asterisk that says, honor them, but if they were screw-ups, you're good. No. And unforgiveness, that's going to just continue to destroy you. If you don't come to a place where you can forgive your father, then you've got to ask for that kind of grace. You've got to ask Jesus to be able to open up your eyes to see how much he's forgiven you so that you can forgive him. And finishing with this thought, especially to the fathers in this room, because I know most of you. In this church, we've got great men who I can look to and go, here's the kind of father that I want to be. Here's the kind of children that I want to raise. Your role, and listen, you're already a father. There's no going back. There's no throwing that baby somewhere. There's no stuffing it. You're not going back. You're already there. And so you really have no option but to step up. And you really got no option but to leave a legacy. See, we live in a culture that says, oh, once your kids are, 18, they can be taught, they're out of the home and now you're free. Or for the Russian culture, it's once your kids are married, and sometimes that's before 18, but that's a different sermon altogether. Once your kids are married, then they're out of your home and you're free. No, you never stop being a father. That role doesn't end until you die. And so for you to pick up the phone, for you to pursue that relationship, that's the call of God for you. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, finishing up with this, verse 13. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. Be watchful. Be careful of the pitfalls. Be careful to not provoke your children to anger. Be careful in how you treat with them. Be careful in how you talk to them. Be careful in how you walk with them. Be careful in how you live with them. Be watchful. Stand firm. Be dependable. Have a spine. Be able to teach right from wrong. Be able to know the word and be able to point to the word. Be able to instruct in the word. Act like men. Act like men. You don't just do the things that you want to do. You do the things that you have to do. You do the things that God has called you to do. And be strong. Physically be strong. Emotionally be strong. Spiritually be strong. Be able to carry. And let all that you do be done in love. Seek the best for your wife. Seek the best for your kids. Seek the best for your church. Do it all in love towards them. And this is hard, and this is strenuous, and it's tiring. And I'll tell you just about my life. I'll wake up, go to work, come home, be with the kids for a little bit, go to church, come home, be with the wife, put the kids to sleep, wake up, and do that again. Not too much time for free time, not too much time for activities, and it is the best thing ever. Because you give yourself to what God has entrusted to you. Fathers, one more question. If your boys grow up to be like you, is that a good thing? And I know we want them to be better than us, and 100%. But if they grow up to be like you, is that a good thing? Second question, if your daughters marry a man like you, is that a good thing? For a lot of us in this church, I can say a lot of fathers, a lot of dads, yes. Praise God if that happens. But we've got to answer that for ourselves. The things that I'm doing in my walk with Christ and how I treat my wife and how I treat my kids and how I treat my job and how I treat my boss and how I treat my church, what kind of example am I setting with my life? And if my kids do that, do I want that? And young men, I hope that you were listening. Because for you, walking in integrity, walking in love towards your wife, walking in love towards your church, walking in love towards Jesus, that all starts before you have the privilege and the honor of being a father. And how you navigate that, how faithful you are in that, that projects 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. God has called us, fathers, to the greatest calling in the world, and that is to be a father. And so praise Him, be rooted in Him, be dependable. And by the grace of God, I hope that we increase in those kind of men. Amen. Let's pray.